What's going on? This is Zach Adelstein here with DFS Army, and today we're going to be going over the Week 8 main slates for college football. Um, been a nice season so far, doing really well. Basketball just started up, so I know a lot of people are going that way. We're still at it over here. Have a nice slate this week, some really nice games to go over, and I actually really like this slate and how Draftkings has set it up. My voice is kind of out. Went to the Astros game last night. Here with Aaron Friedman, who is our other half of our college football staff over at DFS Army. Is going to help a ton. And yeah, we're going to go over it. We'll go over DraftKings first and go over some FanDuel plays that aren't on the main slate, DraftKings at the end. And let's go ahead and get started. How's your week been, Aaron? How have you been the past couple of weeks?
Good. Yeah, it's been busy. It's just, as you know, it just once the college football season starts, it's just nonstop, basically, until New Year's. But no,
Yeah,
it,
for
it's
sure.
been good. It's a fun Northwestern notwithstanding. It's been a fun season.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I mean it gets going, and then tonight we're doing this on Thursday night. We have that sports equinox with NFL, NBA, MLB, and NHL going. Have that again this weekend as well as college football. So it's gonna be a great sports weekend all around. So yeah, let's get going. So starting over here, we'll go game by game like we normally do. We have Kansas going to Baylor, who's an 8.5 point favorite. The total here is 16.5. Got these spreads earlier in the week. They've gone up and down a little bit, and they're going to continue to change just with injury coming out and everything, as we know. But a few interesting things here to look at. Jason Bean's in a really tough spot. Had a decent game last week against Oklahoma, but Baylor does have a much better defense than Oklahoma. Want to look is at Blake Shapen. He's in concussion protocol. He's been decent this year, hasn't been great, but that Kansas pass defense is just awful. They have been bleeding, um, just bleeding fantasy points everywhere, bleeding regular points everywhere. Um, so it's really a place to attack. If he is out, I kind of want to take a look. Backup has been Kyron Drones. Played last week, did okay, 7 for 14, 95 yards, ran a little bit, dual threat. So he's someone that's in play, but at 6,100, he's not, priced down any that we need to shove him in there. So it's someone I really want to look at. Um, Going over to running back, excuse me. Again, I'm not really gonna hammer these Kansas running backs. They still kind of like their committee, and Baylor has a very good rush defense. Richard Reese is finally getting priced where he deserves, but he doesn't play here. There's not a ton of value on this DraftKings slate, so he is a guy that I kind of want to look at for some places. And then going over to go with that bad Kansas pass defense. Two places I really like to look are Ben Sims and Gavin Holmes. Both had a ton of targets last week. I think both had like 8 to 10 targets last week. Sims is a tight end. Gets a touchdown. Had a touchdown last week. Only had 2 receptions, but he had a decent amount of targets. And before that, he had a nicer catch volume as well. It was much more efficient. Holmes last week kind of went off. 7 catches for 210 yards and a touchdown. Didn't kind of go off. He did go off. He's priced up a little bit this week, but he's still a nice mid-price play. And this is a defense I really want to attack. So yeah, what are you looking at here, Aaron?
Yeah, I agree. Most of my attention on the receivers probably here. So I like Holmes and Sims definitely on the Baylor side, and I like Fairchild. If you pull up his card, he's been awesome for Kansas, and he seems to have a good connection with Jason Bean. So for 3,700, he's in play for me.
Okay, yeah, I don't mind that at all. Nice pump play. But yeah, I mean that's kind of I think this will be a decent game to watch. Lots of nice games to watch on this slate all day here. Yeah, let's move on to Syracuse at Clemson. Surprise undefeated matchup. Um, Syracuse has been playing pretty well. They're traveling to Clemson. This is only their second road game this year, which does kind of concern me a little bit. Looking here, DJU is a little bit expensive for me, especially with this total. Total's 51. Clemson's favored by 13.5 at home here. But he's had some nice games and he's looking really good. Um, you go back to that Wake Forest game. He's getting it done on the ground as well, getting some rush touchdowns. He has 12 to 14 rushes in each of the last 4 games, which really helps his bottom line. He's a little bit expensive for what I like for him, but I do think he's in play for GPPs for sure. Going over to Garrett Schrader, this is a much more difficult matchup for him. I don't mind in some cases stacking this matchup, though. We've seen that Clemson will shoot out at times. They are getting a bunch of their defensive injured players back, basically players that haven't played all season that were injured before the season. Breesy obviously is back this week. It was back last week. So that is a tough spot. Going over to running back, 2 places to look here are Will Shipley and Sean Tucker. Tucker's decent price this week. They priced him appropriately, I think, for this matchup. He always has upside, but Clemson is still one of the best run defenses, in the country. Will Shipley got volume last week, but we go back and look, he didn't get a ton of volume the 2 weeks before. It's kind of been closer games where he's getting volume, and with this spread being what it is, I don't necessarily love that spot. But he's a GPP play. He has that 25, 30-point upside. Going over to wide receiver, I don't like playing Clemson wide receivers. They're just kind of variable. They vary way too much, and they're interchangeable. I do like going to Gadsden here. We have seen this secondary of Clemson get burned, and he is their deep threat. He's a tight end, but he makes great catches. Had a big week last week. I believe, has had 8 to 10 targets in every game. The last 3 games had maybe 8 or 9 the week before that as well, maybe 7 or 8. Has over 100 yards in 3 of the last 4 games, and has 2 touchdown games over that time. I don't think that Schrader by any means is Hartman, so I don't think he's going to do what Wake Forest did to them. But if they're going to give Gadsden extra targets here, I really like this spot for him at 6,300. What are you looking at here, Aaron?
Yeah, I like those calls. Tucker, I could see in GPPs if they use him in the passing game a lot. I'm not crazy about him though.
Yeah.
And then on the Clemson side, Antonio Williams is someone there. He's a young receiver for Clemson. The price is not amazing, but I don't know. He's been okay. It's other than him, he's my favorite receiver there. And other than Gadsden, the receiver options aren't great here.
Yeah, I mean it's a game that could produce a lot of points, but they just spread the volume out so much. Just kind of where it's at. Moving right along to Iowa at Ohio State. I was traveling to Ohio State, who's a 29.5-point favorite. Total here is sitting at 49.5. Some interesting things for this game. I don't know that I totally love it for the first time as far as fantasy goes. CJ Stroud, I think, is always in play. He's one of the most expensive quarterbacks on the slate. But this Iowa defense is really good. It's a really good defense. They should get blown out, but he's not going to. They're not going to put up 52, necessarily 55 points. I don't think they could put up 40 points. So there is some upside there. But at this price, it's one of those games you need to watch. And this is a team that they will play to their opponent's weaknesses, and they have a decent pass defense. I'm not touching anybody on Iowa, first of all. The volume going back and forth so much, and this is a good run defense. Wide receivers, one place I really want to look. JSN, Smith and Jigba is supposed to be back this week, which makes things a lot more interesting. It takes me totally off of Fleming. Harrison had a huge game last week, but he, kind of these wide receivers have been interchangeable. Harrison's been he's GPP only at this price for me. And Jigba, before I really go heavy on him, I want to see what he can do on that hamstring. So I'm kind of just wait and see. I'll have a piece of him, but not have a ton of him. I'm going back to the well, going back to Emeka Egbuka. He's been the most consistent guy by far. The Rutgers game, they didn't throw the ball at all. They didn't do anything. At least 24 DraftKings points. Besides that, 3 of the last 4 games over 30. He's getting I think he only had 6 targets in each of the last 3 games, but he still goes off with them. He's an end zone threat. He's under 7K. So yeah, I mean, I'm just going to go back to the well, I think, for my exposure to this game in this Ohio State game. What are you thinking over there, Aaron?
Yeah, I agree. The running backs are too hard here, especially if it blows out, then Hayden can start getting work too.
Yeah.
So, Stroud I'm fine with just because they're still implied for 40 points. So, and then yeah, mostly JSN and Egbuka for me. And then I don't know, Laporta's there's not a lot of value, so I could see Laporta as like a last guy in, but yeah, no one I'm crazy about.
Yeah, he has upside. It's hard to play this Iowa offense.
Fair enough.
On down to Cincy going to SMU. Total here is 61.5, and Cincy's favored by 3 on the road. Few things to watch. Bryant should be back here. He's expected to kind of back, had a concussion last week. I don't really love him anyways at this price. He's just too expensive for his range of outcomes most of the week. I would much rather go to Mordecai, who's going to throw the ball 45 times a game. Did not have to at Navy, or did not at Navy, because Navy really made them run the ball. But that is far. So that's kind of a misleading score. This was 20 minutes left in the game. Navy that. But I mean, you can see most weeks well. Going running, and it looks like they want to give him some volume. If you get, especially in the game defense, I'm not a big. Let's hope we need to back that for him. Now this guy that was going to take some volume and no step up. So target a lot of targets here. Maybe get a piece. It's really decent. Before that, getting a ton of catch. They both are bust. Could give you so no. But what are you looking at here?
I don't know. I kind of like the under in this game, so I don't want to get too crazy here. I definitely like McClellan a good amount, and then maybe McDaniel is like a last guy in, kind of a running back. I thought Gardner would have a bigger role. But yeah, it's not a great game environment outside of McClellan and Rice, maybe, or taking a shot on Curly.
Lower total game is 49.5. Notre Dame 20.5. Feels here. How much Notre Dame if we can put up any point. But looking at it, quarterbacks running best and just there's those two on defense. He's been hurt. Getting in the game, I don't want to. My honestly the only had to down week last week and get in the end zone. First time since week 1 that he didn't get in the end zone. I think he's going to get 2, maybe 3 touchdowns here. I think they're going to pepper him with targets. He's a top play for me on this slate. At 5K, he's going to get a ton of targets. He has a bad defense to go up against. I'm just going to put him into a ton of lineups. What are you looking at here, Aaron?
Yeah, I agree. Mostly just Mayer for me. The receivers are really underwhelming for Notre Dame.
Yeah. I mean, just the whole way this offense is run, they don't get anybody involved, and they finally started using Mayer correctly. Moving on to a very interesting game to me is West Virginia at Texas Tech. Total here is 68.5. Tech is favored by 7. Tech has come out and said that Show may be back this week. All 3 quarterbacks might be available. Multiple quarterbacks might play, which I don't think would happen, but that is what they claimed. So it's something. This is a game you really need to watch the news. If Show is out here, I think Morton is going to get the start. He did not get the start last week because Smith was hurt. Smith played a play at receiver, so that is not why he got the start for talent reasons. And I loved his upside. He looked really good, and I think this is a great spot for him. If Show is back, we have no clue who is going to play because this is the team that did not announce that Baron Morton was starting 2 weeks ago. So you really need to watch news and be ready to pivot, as this is a later game. And it's at a weird spot. It's at 2 p.m. Central Time, my time, 3 p.m. Eastern. It is not at a normal start time. So don't come in at 3:30 Eastern and be ready to just move over and figure it out because you'll be late. Going over to running back, Texas Tech has been gone back and forth with their running back so much. I'm kind of fading that situation. West Virginia, Mathis went off with Donaldson out, but Donaldson's back and cheap. I actually was at that Texas game where he got knocked out. It was a very scary situation, but supposedly he's back and good to go. I'm wondering what kind of shape he's in. He was never a guy that was in the best shape. He would pull off, 15, 20-yard run and be huffing and puffing and have to come on the sideline. He's a young guy. So I don't know how he's been working out the past couple of weeks. But at 5,100, I love him for GPPs. He has huge playability. Texas Tech defense can give up some big plays sometimes. This is a game that I think will really shoot out. So that's one place I want to look, see if make sure he's good to go. And then going over to wide receiver. First of all, West Virginia wide receivers. Ford Wheaton's going to get a ton of volume. I think he's a decent play. But at that price, I'd much rather go to Prather, who's getting similar volume the past couple of weeks, and similar upside. You can see last 2 weeks has 8 catches each week, has at least 6 catches in every game after week 1 this year, and a decent floor. Ford Wheaton, if you look at him, you're paying an additional $1,300 for him, and has actually not looked as good since week 2 as Prather has. So I'd much rather save that upside and go to Prather. But I think Ford Wheaton is, if you want to pivot off of that a little bit. Now, the Texas Tech wide receivers are about as interesting as their quarterbacks. If Miles Price is out, I think Xavier White is definitely a good play again. If he's in, they play the same position. They play that slot receiver that this offense loves. So that kind of takes me off of White and wants me to see a little bit more Price. A different receiver has gone off every week for this team. Trey Cleveland had 15 targets last week, 9 receptions for 100 yards. 15 targets. That's crazy. Bradley had a ton of targets last week. The only reason, is that the quarterback? Is that the direction they want to go? Is that the game script, what they were doing against Oklahoma State? Not totally sure. West Virginia can put up a ton of points too, though. So this is kind of a game that I'm not opposed to game stacking. Jaron Bradley also had, I believe he was back up to 10 targets last week after not doing much since, that early season 2-week stretch. So, these are all guys that I think you can mix into GPPs. I think you can game stack this if you can figure out who's starting at quarterback. But that's something you probably won't know until, 2 o'clock Eastern time. So after a lot. So it's something you're going to have to plan for. So yeah, same thing with Miles Price. You're probably not going to know, his news blurb here is that he's questionable going to Saturday's game. Uh, so yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. It's a game I think they could win, or I think this could win a GPP, but you're not going to know anything about it until after lock, and that's why it could win you a GPP. What are you looking at, Aaron?
Yeah, definitely a weird game for sure. I like Prather a lot too. I'm looking at Morden a lot for FanDuel. He's pretty cheap over there. Him
Nice.
and Smith are both 8,400, which is way below the average like high end quarterback price. Um yeah, I like Cleveland, and it's so hard with Cleveland and White. Um but I like that range both cuz you don't need them to go nuclear here.
Yep, I agree completely. It's just it all hinges on what Miles Price decides to do this week.
Yeah.
Moving on to Ole Miss, these 2:30 games. Ole Miss at LSU. Um, this game flipped. Ole Miss was favored at first, and it flipped over after some big bets to LSU -1.5. Total here 66.5. It's gone up and down all week. Um, I want to start with Jaden Daniels. Um, he has looked better. Obviously, last week he went off, but he's looked decent in the past game, the past couple of weeks. I know after that Auburn game, they had a players only meeting with just the quarterbacks and the receivers, kind of got together. And they've looked a little bit better since then. He's really made a much better connection with his wide receivers. Still getting that run volume, which I really love. Don't know if I love this price in this spot though. Ole Miss has a very good defense, even though this total isn't great total. So it's kind of it's a misleading to me. I disagree with the total, but
Yeah.
I also can see it happening. Um, so it's kind of one of those things I am going to dig more into as it comes, see kind of how that goes. Then moving on to running back, LSU has a good run defense, and with the way these guys are eating into each other, and the way these game scripts have gone, where I don't know exactly what some games they throw a ton, some games they run a ton. This might be one of those games where they're challenged, similar to the Kentucky game. It was close. You go look at that, and each one had, I think it was 15 and 14 carries between Judkins and Evans. And if it's going to be a more even game, or excuse me, 9 and 15 carries, if you're going to only get 30 carries between the two of them or 25 carries, I kind of want to avoid the situation at these prices. Um, and if LSU puts up points, you're not going to see nearly as much of Judkins and Evans, which does concern me. They are getting involved in the passing game, but at these prices, you need to get some volume. I'm not touching LSU's run game, even with Emory back. It's just everywhere. Wide receivers are very interesting for me here too. Butte Butte's a preseason All-American. He was one of the top wide receivers in the country last year before he got hurt, and the year before that. He was the next coming of Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. And now he is getting back involved in this team. It seemed like he didn't want to be there for the first 5 weeks of the season. Had his first 100-yard game. Seems like he's getting on the same page as Daniels. He could go off for 40, 50 points. He is that kind of receiver. Any given week, I don't care who they're playing. We just saw a receiver do it against Alabama. If someone can do it against Alabama, someone can do it against Ole Miss. So this is someone that is very interesting in GPPs for me. Neighbors has been decent. Mingo just put up a 0 after putting up a 50. So that is, I don't like going to this Ole Miss passing game. If you really need to, Malik Heath is going to be your guy. He's the most consistent guy, but it's just not something you need to do. What are you looking at here, Aaron?
At running back, I like Josh Williams a decent amount. I think he's 3,400. Former walk on there at LSU. Yeah, the receivers are tough here. I'm just looking at the running backs mostly.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, Williams has double digits in his past 2 games, so
Yeah, he's a nice mid-price guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Butte is one of those guys. He could give you 5 points, but he has the talent. He just hasn't put it together, or he didn't care.
And going off of the last game too, I think you can start a lineup at all 3 p.m. Eastern or later, guys. Like, have a few lineup templates like that you can play around with on the main slate.
Yeah, for sure. You go back and look at it, and you just kind of fade these. There's 4 games at the, a kickoff. They kick off at noon Eastern. There's that UNLV Notre Dame game that kicks off at 2:30 Eastern, and 1:30 for my time is Central Time. And then you start with that West Virginia Texas Tech game, and you can make lineups for sure out of all of this. Very similar to last week. Last week, I think I had one or two guys in most of my lineups in that early slate. Moving over here to UCLA at Oregon. This is kind of the game of the week. Oregon is favored by 5.5, and the total is 70.5. Actually opened at like 77 or something, and has kept coming, crept down. I love a lot of pieces in this game. Bo Nix is very expensive, and he has earned it. Like, you have to give it to him. He has played great this year, been a great fantasy asset. Kind of, I like where we're at now. You can take out that Georgia game. You don't even have to look at it. Starting week 2, he has at least 32 fantasy points every week. Has a nice ceiling, nice floor. Total here, UCLA isn't the best defense. They put up a lot of points. Haven't good enough defense to let that offense do what it needs to do. But Nix is also being used in the run game around the goal line. In the past 4 games, he has 8 rushing touchdowns, 5 in the last 2 games. It's one of those things where they will let him run there, which I love. Which in a second we'll talk about why I don't play their running backs. DTR is a great price here. Not quite as high of a ceiling, but he has a nice floor as well. In games that they've needed points, he has put up a ton of points. They didn't really need him at the beginning of the season. Last 2 games they have had good opponents, and he has thrown it 33 and 23 times. He's running it a ton. He's getting rushing touchdowns now that he needs it, and this is a great game to stack. Going over to running back, I don't know why Charbonnet is 6,700. Oregon had an awful game against Georgia, and if you go back and look at any of their, just looking at the teams they've gone up against since then, they have played Eastern Washington, BYU, who has not had a solid RB1 this year, Washington State, who has a transfer, Stanford, who has 1 running back, and Arizona, who throws the ball a ton. And they've, for the most part, blown everybody out. Outside of that Washington State game where it was a shootout. So they haven't really had to go up against a good running back since that Georgia game, where I believe they gave up about 60 DraftKings points to running backs. Charbonnet has a ton of volume since they've needed him the last 2 weeks. That's 22 carries a week. I figured they were saving him for that, and they have proven that. He's getting a little bit of work in the pass game. 5 in the last 3 games, Colorado, I won't even count, but 5.6 on 22 carries and 9 yards of carry on 22 carries against this Utah team. That's a very good defense, much better than this Oregon run defense. So, I love this price. I love this spot. He is a top play for sure for me. Going over to wide receiver, Oregon spreads it out so much, it's really hard to predict where they're going to go. And the one guy I would go would be Franklin, and I'm not paying that price for him. Bobo's interesting to me as a GPP play if you want to pivot off of Charbonnet. So I do think he's going to carry a ton of ownership. So if you wanted to make some game stacks and pivot off of that. But besides that, it's kind of the only place I really want to go here at receiver. My main plays here are Nix, DTR, and Charbonnet. What are you looking at, Aaron?
Yeah, I agree with Nix here. I've talked about this in our Discord a lot, but some of the pricing is so bad that you can play guys at any price. So yeah, I like Nix a lot here too. This should be a great game. Charbonnet for sure. He's really expensive on FanDuel, but I'll try to get a lot of exposure on DraftKings. And then at receiver, Franklin, I like him a lot on FanDuel. He's 7,600 there, so
Yeah.
a lot less of a hit. And then Ferguson would be like a GPP dart throw. He hasn't scored in a while, but week 2 and 3 it was very involved. So that might be a way to get different to have him in your punt pool.
Yeah, he's their tight end. They like to use him in the red zone for sure. Moving over to Texas at Oklahoma State. This game has moved a lot this week. The line has moved a lot this week. When I wrote it down, it was Oklahoma State +6 with a total of 66.5. It opened at Texas -1, and I believe the total was like 67. Now the total's down to 61. Few things I think, there's some sharps that are on Texas, but I also think that Spencer Sanders' question is health is in question. Mike Gundy was asked about it earlier this week, and basically his response was, if you had injuries, you wouldn't tell the other team either for strategy purposes, which does not give you a ton of confidence about Spencer Sanders. There were rumors last week that he might not play. He had a shoulder issue. Toughed it out, had a really good game. His throwing obviously has not looked great the last 2 weeks comparatively. You look at him earlier in the season, he's anywhere from, had a kind of rough game against Arizona State at 55%, but 68%, 81%, 69%. Last 2 weeks, he's been held under 50% completion rate. Thrown for only 1 touchdown each of those weeks. He is running the ball more because his shoulder is hurt, which is something that could help him a lot. Has 2 rushing touchdowns in each of the last 2 games. So it's kind of a catch-22. That being said, Texas has a quick defense. They have a really good run defense. They have given up had some issues with running quarterbacks, as we've seen in the past couple of weeks. But I'm concerned about the spot with his health. Kind of want to keep an eye on it. Yours, I think, is a GPP play. Kind of struggled last week, and even in a struggling week, had 17 DraftKings points, 3 touchdowns. Accuracy seemed a little bit off, but he still threw 65% completion rate. He's not a run guy though, so it's kind of hard to go there because he's not going to get you that dual threat upside. Going to running back, Bijan Robinson's expensive. If you can afford him, play him. Last week, Oklahoma State really struggled against the run. They gave up a ton of explosive plays, over 5 yards a carry, and this is also a game. There are several games we'll be in Discord talking about it. There are lots of weather games this week with 20, 25-mile-an-hour winds in the middle part of the country that we need to watch. This is a game that I have read could have that. If that's the case and they can't air it out, which is why they have Quinn Ewers to air it out down the field, Bijan's going to get even more carries and possibly more checkdowns, which is great. He had a season high last week in receptions, had 28 carries. They're starting to lean on him more and more, so he's going to be used. Richardson, same thing. If it's a weather game, I do like him as a play. He's just not the most efficient guy. I mean, any game, even just looking at the games, much less on the season at 4 yards a clip. Has touchdowns here and there. Only has 5 total touchdowns on the year, but he's in play. He's a decent price guy. Over at wide receiver, Oklahoma State's all over the place. I love they finally priced up my guy to where he should be, Braden Johnson. Big play guy, not my favorite spot for him. After a big week, Bryson Green had a 0, killed a lot of my lineups. I think I had a lineup that came in 10th place, one of the big GPPs that had a 0 from Bryson Green in it. I don't hate going back there for GPPs, though. He did have like 3 or 4 targets still. Just didn't bring any of them in. Over for Texas, Xavier Worthy had a big week. I think his connection is growing with Quinn Ewers, which is really nice. And then even, I think Jatavian Sanders still had 6 targets, only brought in 3 of them, didn't have a big week. But we've seen what he can do. Has 20 DraftKings points plus in 3 weeks. This is a great punt play for me, especially in GPPs. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I like both guys, both Sanders and Ewers a lot. Sanders has shown his toughness with playing through the shoulder injury, so I'm not too worried about him. Richardson's been, I mean, we all know about Bijan, but Richardson's been awesome as himself. Especially on FanDuel, he's going to be an all format play because he scores most games,
Yeah.
so that's important over there. At receiver, yeah, it's kind of messy. Sanders for sure is a punt. Richardson's Richardson and Bryson Green are interesting on the DraftKings side. Richardson sees a good amount of targets, and then Green's had some really nice games this season.
Yeah, they spread it out and haven't concentrated that volume at all. Going over to Boston College at Wake Forest. Start at the top. Sam Hartman's a great play this week. Boston College does not have a great defense. Uh, so he's a guy that I think is the best top tier quarterback. Has not had a great past couple of weeks. They did not throw it a lot against Army. They didn't need to. They're blowing them out. I don't think Army's ever a team you try to show up. So they just kind of did what they needed to do and got out. And then Florida State was a tough game. They have a good defense, but he has that. We know that upside. And Boston College is giving up a lot of yards to opposing quarterbacks. I don't really want to guess a ton with these running backs, especially not at this price. Last week, Ellison had 11 carries to Turner's 8, and just don't. When they're both in play, it's hard to play either of them. And wide receiver, the only place that I've been able to go for a while for this Wake team is A.T. Perry. They just haven't had a second receiver step up. Banks for a few weeks was looking like he would be the guy, and it's just kind of faded back again. And so Perry's kind of a guy I'll get a decent chunk of. I do think you can play Hartman naked. You don't need to stack him with anyone. My favorite receiver on this game is Zay Flowers. In those games, in those close games, not against Clemson, it wasn't a close game. He's having 12, 15 targets a game. I think this is a spot where he's going to get peppered with targets, and we've seen that there is not a great top on this Wake Forest defense. They give up big plays to wide receivers. So he's a guy I think that you can have a decent chunk of. What are you looking at here?
Yeah, I agree. Mostly Hartman, Jerkovic, Perry, and Flowers.
Yeah, Jerkovic's a decent play. I didn't talk about it at the top, but Wake Forest is favored here by 21 points, the 61.5 point total, which Jerkovic's a pump play for me. It's kind of a GPP cheapie, but I think he's a decent play. Going over to Purdue at Wisconsin. Wisconsin's favored by 3. The total's 51.5 here. O'Connell just had the best game of his season so far. He's got that volume. It was against Nebraska. So it's a little bit of a shootout. So you have to take that into consideration. But I think when he's down here at under 6K, he's always a play for GPPs. Going over to running back. I've been playing Braylon Allen a lot of weeks. This is a week I'm probably going to fade him. Purdue has not given up 100 yards rushing to any running back room this year. I think like 96 is the most they've given up to any running back room. Now, they haven't faced a Braylon Allen yet. He does have a ton of upside. But this is just, they have a good run defense. It doesn't seem like Purdue would, but they do. I don't think with Doru back, I'm going to go to Maccabee. I do think that I kind of want to see if Maccabee is actually past Doru, because Doru did get some carries once last week, and he did. But I think that was more just a conditioning in his first week back. Wide receiver, we need to watch. Charlie Jones is questionable here, but he did go back to his previous volume that he was getting. If he's going to get that volume, he's always in play, even at this price. So you just kind of have to keep an eye on it. If he's out, I kind of want to see what receivers are there. Sheffield becomes in play then. Durham is their tight end. He's a decent play at these prices. Not really going anywhere with Wisconsin in this passing game. I'm not chasing it. The one guy that was getting decent volume is DK, and he's decent. But at this price, I don't really want to chase that. It's just too expensive for me. What are you thinking here? What do you think of O'Connell?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised that Wisconsin's favored, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I like Purdue on both sides of the ball. I'm fine with O'Connell here. We saw Stroud have a nice game against them. Not saying he's Stroud, but for 6K, I'm fine with him. I agree with you on the running backs that's kind of a full fade for me. And receiver, I'm hoping Jones is ineffective, and I'll try to play a lot of Durham and Sheffield.
Yeah, at this price, he's going to have to do a lot. It's more for me. Do you take O'Connell naked in some lineups and, hope Jones does decent, but not much more than Sheffield and Durham, or, if he doesn't see the field, then that's easy too. Going over to Memphis at Tulane. Tulane's favored here by 7 with a 56.5 point total. Pratt's a decent play. Been airing it out a decent amount. He always has. Been running it a little bit more. 13 plus carries in 3 of the last 4 games. Getting those, 3 rushing touchdowns in the last 2 games as well has really helped his bottom line. This Memphis team isn't a great defense. I will say to start, Tulane has a great defense. They have one of the top defenses in the country, so I'm not going anywhere on Memphis this week. Hennigan would be in play most weeks, but like I said, he hadn't done a ton this year. And even with, I'm not chasing that 31-point game last week against one of the best defenses in the group of 5. Going to running back, Tajay Spears is used all over the field. Wasn't used in the pass game for the first time in a while last week, but getting a ton of run production. There's not, again, a ton of mid-priced or cheap running backs on this slate, so he's a guy I really want to keep an eye on. And then going to wide receivers, Deuce Watts is kind of the top guys. He's been trending up for Tulane, so he's a decent mid-price guy if you want to go there. Has touchdowns in each of the last 3 games, but you don't have to. It's not a guy I don't think you have to. I do think you can play Pratt without bringing it back anywhere. What are you thinking of this game?
Yeah, I like Pratt a decent amount. It's a pretty fair price, I think. And definitely Spears too. You're right, at that range there's not really a lot of options. So I agree there. And Watts is this guy, and they don't throw a ton, so he should get a lot of targets, and I see him paying off that salary.
Yeah, and even when they do throw, I mean, he doesn't have a ton of catches, but they hit Spears a decent amount. And then, like last game, they had 35 throws, and I think like 8 different players had targets.
Yeah.
Moving over to the last game on this DraftKings slate, Arizona State is traveling to Stanford. Stanford favored by 3 with a total of 55.5, which is crazy considering Stanford just got their first FBS win, in 13 games or something last week. And now they are favored over Arizona State. Emory Jones, I think, has so much upside, and they don't know how to use him there. So kind of fading both of these quarterbacks for me. I think he does have upside. He just hasn't done anything this year. Like they for whatever reason can't get a big game out of him. So kind of gonna fade that too. Even I like that price. 2 places I really am targeting this game are the 2 running backs. It seems like they want to use Xavier Valladay all of a sudden. Like they didn't. They fired coach. They weren't going to use him, and then against Washington, they gave him 23 carries, and they're getting him involved in the passing game. So he has huge upside. He's a great back. He's probably the best player on their team. So if they're going to use him, I love this price and I love this spot. The other guy that I don't know why they haven't figured out that he is literally the only running back on their team left. It's not hurt. It's Casey Filkins. He's too cheap. He is, much as I love Spears, give me Filkins. He's going to get all the volume in the world that he wants. He's going to be the goal line guy for the most part. They don't have really anyone. They had EJ Smith, who's out for the year. And yeah, he's just, he's going to get a ton of volume. The guy behind him has Robinson, who gets 1 to 5 carries a week. So yeah, just give me a ton of Filkins. I'm probably going to load up on him. He is at the cheaper end of the viable running backs on this slate. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, I agree. I think McKee almost made my FanDuel cheat sheet last week, but I couldn't quite get there. But I am a little intrigued with him being so
Yeah,
cheap. I agree with the running backs. They're both workhorses. And at receiver, with Michael Wilson out, guys like Higgins and Tremaine are, especially Higgins,
it's
that's
cheap.
a pretty good price, and get a stack for less than 10K.
Yeah,
Um, I like him a decent amount here. And
I don't
then
mind it.
we're the tight end Eurosec. Um, can't find him. Um,
Oh, he's down there,
oh
3K. They
yeah,
forgot to
man,
price him this week. Nice. He's got
that's
upside
not
for sure.
that's not bad.
No, not at all. Yeah, definitely. I think this is one of those games that might get overlooked too, just with there's
Yeah.
other big games on this slate and it being later. But yeah, I think pieces of it are fine for sure. But yeah, so that's the DraftKings slate. Tell me, got any big plays? You know, some of your top plays over there on FanDuel that's not on this slate.
Um. So the night game, the the few night games that are not on are um UCF ECU. So that's a really good spot where you can play Bowser's 8200 on
Nice.
FanDuel, which I like a lot. And then O'Keefe and Baker are 8100 and 7200. So I think you can get a few UCF pieces, and ECU's been pretty solid too. They have guys like Johnson who can blow up, and Winstead's been solid for them. So that's a fun game that's not on the main slate for DraftKings due to timing. And um yeah, K-State TCU should be fun
Oh,
for GPP. And that will be on the DraftKings night slate, I'm sure. But yeah, we'll have everything in our Discord and on the website this week.
yeah, for sure. If you haven't joined yet, head on over to dfsarmy.com. Um, Definitely. I think we have a special going on right now, 20% off all of our memberships, weekly, monthly, yearly for our VIPs. Having a great start to the NBA season. First night had a guy take down the big contest on DraftKings, split it with a few people, but still over a $50,000 win. Um, our NFL is doing great. Had a Millie Maker in there already. Our college football doing really well. NHL is going strong. And yeah, we're just doing great at DFS Army. Link will be in the description below to head on over and check us out and join us. We'd love to see you there. We'll have our Domination Station Optimizer ready to go this week. Like always, we'll have all of our cheat sheets and all the breaking news that you need in Discord. So yeah, we hope to see you this week. Good luck, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, guys.